he gets caught out in front of the fires by NBC's Jacob Soboroff, who is further left than Gavin Newsom. Trust me, I know him. I worked with him for a year plus at NBC and spent a fair amount of time with this guy. Very far left kid. And not a kid, but he's younger. And he starts asking Gavin Newsom a bunch of softball questions. And Newsom tries to spin that everything was filled. All the reservoirs were totally filled. I don't know what the hubbub is about. And Soboroff asks one follow-up question, pointing out that the reservoir that serviced Pacific Palisades was empty. Watch this.
When he talks about the Delta smelt and reservoirs, the reservoirs are completely full. The state reservoirs here in Southern California, that mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us. Responding to Donald Trump's insults, we would spend another month. I'm very familiar with them. Every elected official that he disagrees with, very familiar with them.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation, to understand what was happening.
They believe, or the Washington Post, they believe that this fire in the Pacific Palisades was the result of a nearby fire that had started on New Year's Eve thanks to fireworks that they put out, but it was still smoldering. And with the high winds, it sort of jumped. Anyway, all of which is foreseeable. And he's going to die on the hill of, well, the locals didn't fill their reservoir, but the state reservoirs had water.
Amazing. I mean, the time to look into it is before the entire city burns to the ground. That's kind of the time you target as a governor, someone who's competent to look into such matters as not having water to fight fires. You don't look into it after you're just looking at a bunch of rubble. You look at it before the issue. That's entirely your job as governor. And he's failed at it over and over and over again. And that's going to be his fallout. Of course, he's going to be basically the multiple Spider-Man meme where everyone's just pointing fingers at each other. That's what's going to happen in California. They're all going to, I guess, decide to blame everybody. Of course, Donald Trump is going to get his share of the inexplicable blame. He's not even president of the United States yet, but this is still going to be his fault somehow. Mm-hmm. That's all out there. And this is something that, as you point out, someone like Ron DeSantis doesn't do. They look at this stuff in advance and try to fix it before it happens. And Gavin Newsom has had multiple issues like this. I mean, if you go back to even his handling of COVID, which was horrid and horrific, but one of the first things he did when he got into office, and this is covered in a Michael Lewis book, not a conservative author by any means, but they had an infectious disease expert who was running their health department for the state government. But the problem with her was she was white and blonde. And Gavin Newsom wanted a person of color in that role and hired someone who had absolutely no idea what they were doing whatsoever. This is not me talking about this. Again, this is a liberal author who describes this story in detail. And I'm sure I wouldn't have agreed with everything that an infectious disease expert would have recommended for COVID either. I probably would have my problems with it. But the idea that you would put someone in an important position like that before COVID, not knowing that it was coming, just putting someone in there who looked the way that you wanted them to look, going all out DEI with the lives of Californians, instead of picking someone who was already on staff and already lined up for the job, who was an infectious disease expert because she was white and blonde. This sort of stuff has been foundational to Gavin Newsom and the way he has run the state of California, and people shouldn't forget it. This is his fault. This is his fault. It's Karen Bass's fault. And he needs to be held responsible for it.
Now you've got the media, including CNN's fact checker, air quotes, Daniel Dale, trying to tell us that there was no shortage of water in LA. I mean, we know that the reservoir that serviced the area that burned to the ground was empty. But he's like, there's absolutely no problem with shortage of water in the LA area. Listen to this moron.
There is no shortage of water in the Los Angeles area. The reservoirs are at or above historical levels. The water is there. Now, we have seen high-profile issues in one part of the city, Pacific Palisades, where some hydrants were dry or did not have a lot of water. But that was not because there was not enough water in the region. That was because of technical, logistical, infrastructure issues.
Infrastructure issues. Okay, the LA Times on Friday a Department of Water official acknowledged that the reservoir's absence, the one we're talking about for Palisades, likely contributed to some diminished pressure and dry hydrants in upper regions of the Palisades. The reservoir's absence, meaning look at this empty reservoir that serviced Pacific Palisades, that it contributed to the diminished pressure and the dry hydrants. So how do you figure that there's no shortage of water in the LA area, Daniel Dale, and that this empty reservoir had no effect? Who died and made you fire chief or Department of Water investigator? He knows nothing, this guy. All he knows how to do is run cover for Democrats. They go on in the LA Times, to your point about Michael Lewis, this is no conservative publication. This is not the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post. They write, citing a former, that quote I read you was from a current DWP official. Now they go to a former general manager, a guy named Martin Adams. Had the reservoir been operable, it would have extended water pressure in the Palisades. It would have. Of course, because they ran out of water pressure in the upper parts of the Palisades once the lower parts of the Palisades were in trouble. And by the way, Janice, the woman who runs the Department of Water Works, came out and admitted all this already, Daniel Dale. Some therapists say that debt can make people feel desperate and helpless. I mean, we don't need a therapist to tell us that. That's obviously true. It can ruin your sleep. It can creep into your relationships. It can wreck your happiness. But there are ways to get help. You don't have to just sit and suffer alone and in silence. Let me tell you about Done With Debt. They have aggressive new strategies to end your debt fast. Done With Debt stands between you and your harassing bill collectors. They tirelessly negotiate to slash balances, eliminate interest, and stop the crushing penalties, all without loans or bankruptcy. Done With Debt has one goal: to wipe out your debt for good. Before you make another payment, consider a visit to donewithdebt.com. Speak with one of their strategists for free and tell them I sent you. But you do need to hurry because some debt solutions are time sensitive and you don't want to miss out. Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.